I mentioned that Neal's work saved my life. It was really pretty true. I mean, I kind of escaped into comics, which isn't unusual for people in comic books. But certainly in terms of his work, it was an obsession. It gave me something to aspire to.
Hey everyone, we're here. I'm here with Bill Sienkiewicz, and we're going to talk about Neal Adams. So, Bill, when I was thinking about how to do a quick tribute for Neal Adams, because quite honestly, it came out of nowhere, I just kept circling back to, well, the best person to talk to about this is Bill for obvious reasons. How did you take the news?
It was like I think I was as surprised as anyone. I'd been up that morning, and then I fell asleep actually around the sun was coming up, and then I forget it was like 9 o'clock or something. My phone started going crazy, and I noticed that I got 2 quick phone calls from Chris, Chris Adams, Chris Stone, and then a bunch of other people, and I went, okay, something's up, and then I called Chris back, and she told me, and it was like, it's just like, oh shit, fuck, I can't believe it, I mean, because Neal, everybody in the business sort of feels like Neal is this unstoppable, force. So he's going to be around forever. I mean, he's going to give Betty White, a run for her money,
Yeah.
like be around the 90s. And because he was such a powerful, advocate and artist, the idea that he actually, is gone is really, it's like the logic of it just isn't there. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, I know he'd been sick. I know that he had the sepsis. And I think that, according to Chris, it's like, I think that, they say if you can go a year, you're usually on, okay, you've made it through. And I think it was just a year. I think that, it was just gradually more and more debilitating for him. But I talked to him. I remember when he got out of the, when it was touch and go a year ago, I remember talking to him, and it was a great conversation. I mean, he was just always going. It was like he was the proverbial Energizer bunny. It's just like nothing would stop him, and so the fact that that it did, what it's done for me and for others, it certainly made me rethink, because he was my main influence for a long time. He got me into the business. I wouldn't be me as an artist without him.
Yeah.
So it's made me, it kind of made me stop and reflect on how hard I work, or how much he gave, not only to people like myself, but to the medium and to other causes. And he continues to inspire me. Let's put it that way, because I feel like I've, as a result of his passing, it's like I feel not only a great loss. I mean, I ended up crying. The first day I was in shock. The second day, it's like, that's when it really started hitting me. And then, and I realized that when my own father passed away, my actual flesh and blood father, I had no tears whatsoever. It's like, so I thought that was something to pay attention to.
Not to pry, but were you not close with your biological dad?
Either my parents. I mean, I think that, when both of them passed away, I mean, because of when I mentioned that Neal's work saved my life, it was really pretty true. I mean, I kind of escaped into comics, which isn't unusual for people in comic books. But certainly in terms of his work, it was an obsession. It gave me something to aspire to really, try to be as good as. So, so I just drew like a madman. I would like put myself through boot camp in terms of anatomy and studying and studying and studying and studying. all as sort of a way to shut out and just cope with all the other craziness that I was kind of exposed to every day. So when my parents actually did pass away, I realized that their actual physical departures were kind of redundant. I think I grieved them when I was like 7 years old. So in my late, my 20s, when they actually did go, it was like, I'd already done my grieving. But with Neal, it was like there was none of that. And also I had, he was there for me in a way that my own parents weren't. But like I said, he has made me sort of review and think about however much time I have left, what I want to contribute or to try to make as much of an impact or, as I possibly can for, the betterment of certainly the medium, if not for people. So he seemed to do that just naturally without any effort.
Do you feel any, I don't know, additional responsibility or pressure knowing that you are the comics creator most associated with Neal Adams, with the exception of Denny O'Neil?
That doesn't upset me at all. I mean, I think I'd be probably the first to tell you that that's accurate. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, certainly there are artists that I know that I've influenced who, I don't lose any sleep over, but I tracked them over the years, and it's amazing how many want to disavow. And I'm not even talking about even myself. I just see how many people who are influenced by a certain artist or, growing, during their formative years, how quick they are to sort of want to disavow that at a certain point. And for me, it's like I did my artistic disavowal, my shift away from Neal, just simply to be myself. But Neal was a huge advocate for that. He wanted me to find my own voice. So, and I found that the more I acknowledged with great pride and, and love that I couldn't have picked a better, influence, like the major influence, than him. So, if anything, it left it. I mean, like I said, I've been in the business long enough now to, to have a couple of decades there to be able to still call him dad, as a, like I'm one of his kids, which is something else I feel very proud of as well.
It is pretty well documented how, Neal was your biggest artistic influence when you came up with your Batman, with your DC portfolio when you were first pitching to DC, and then DC turned you down, and then you went to continuity, and that's when Neal recommended you to Jim Shooter at Marvel. And in our first ever interview, I asked you how your professional career would have changed if DC had hired you, meaning you would not have gone to continuity and Neal wouldn't have recommended you to Marvel. I'm going to ask you the same question again now, but how do you think your personal life would have been different?
If I hadn't met Neal?
If you had been hired by DC at that point in time, and therefore, hypothetically, you wouldn't have gone to continuity on that particular day.
Wow, that's a really great question. It's like I mean, usually I can sort of speculate like away, but in that case, it's almost like I think it's so antithetical to the way things went and to the actual course of events that that to engage in that kind of hypothetical, it's not quite the worst case scenario, because I'm sure it would have been fine to work for DC, but after having worked for DC later, it's like, and I found that the corporation aspect of it, and it was a little more buttoned down than Marvel. It's almost like I reject the question completely psychologically. I can't even, because it would have meant one, not meeting Neal, until later. I probably would have met him in the way that, say, guys like Mike Grell did, because I think that Mike Grell was sort of the big Adams guy at DC.
Yeah, he was the Neal Adams influenced guy before you showed up.
Right. And I think I think Nasser was, Nasser was around that same time, or, but I know that Grell was sort of the main guy. I think I was trying to, like, hedge my bets by kind of going into DC. It's like, okay, well, Grell's getting work. I think I think I can match Grell, so I think I got a good shot, at least for them to look it over and give me some pointers. But the major rejection for me is one, having Neal sort of become, like, again, this mentor and father figure and champion for my work, but also the level of irreverence and freedom and no holds barred kind of creativity that I met with, and that I was met with, and that I felt like I was part of at Marvel. I mean, just from the bullpen and everything else, it was just a wild, crazy environment. So it was the perfect petri dish for creativity and for some of the stuff that I eventually did. And I think the fact that I was doing Moon Knight, which was sort of like a Marvel's version of Batman, but I wasn't doing Batman.
Freed you up.
Yeah, it freed me up a lot. I mean, I didn't have to worry about doing, bat-shaped shadows. I could do crescent-shaped shadows. Did that 3 times fast. But yeah, so again, it's like I completely reject the premise of the question only because it's too terrifying to even think of,
Well, that's a huge butterfly effect, isn't it? If DC had hired you back then, Moon Knight doesn't have a Disney Plus show that just ended.
Right. Yeah. And I don't have a psychiatric hospital,
You don't own a psychiatric hospital. Really quickly, what did you think of Moon Knight, the series?
I loved it. I think it's phenomenal. I mean, I know it got a lot of, slams, but everything does. Like, that I can, like, there are people who think that Legion was not a great series either, and it's like, I'm totally biased. I think, Legion is a phenomenal series. So, and I'll fight to the death for the New Mutants film as well, So, opinions are opinions, but I loved it, and I thought that the little Easter egg nod was hilarious.
It was great. My only complaint about it was that it wasn't long enough. The show.
But that's but they are talking about, one, bringing Moon Knight into the MCU, like, more fully, and I don't know if that means other films, or season 2 as well.
Yeah.
So, and I'm very biased toward Oscar Isaac. I think he's a phenomenal actor.
He's amazing. He was pulling off shifts that I've only seen Christopher Reeve do.
Yeah, right.
He's amazing. Aside from the obvious influences on your art, what else did you learn from Neal Adams?
Well, I think I learned one about, loving what you do, and I think also a work ethic, that I think that he had a competition in him that was just like, I think he would even say that when he was starting out on Ben Casey, he would grab other strips, and see if that, like, on certain Sundays, he'd put all the strips next to his and see who kind of won that Sunday, in terms of pushing the boundaries, or, really kind of not phoning it in. And I think that Neal really showed me that you just never stop growing. And for me, it's been true to, like, as much as I wanted to be like him in terms of, the style, when I had other influences that came in, and was getting a lot of the sort of negative response to my work, saying I, learned to draw from him, period, with no other influences. I felt like trying to break away from the Neal Adams influence was as much of sort of like biting the hand that fed me, because I had, I was afraid if I would do my own work with all the other influences that I had accrued and fallen in love with, that I wouldn't get any more work. It was like, so I had to take that chance. That, so the idea of pushing and going into other arenas and just never stopping. Neal was, always pushing for that. And that's something we actually talked about quite often. And I think that that's something that can't be taught. I think you either have that drive or you don't. And I think that that's partly why I think we got along as well as we did. Because he was as much of a mentor and a colleague and a father figure, incredibly supportive. I mean, there was one point when I was married early on when I thought about working in continuity. And I remember my wife at the time, she goes, if you start working in continuity, that's it, we're done. It's like, you're going back and forth with this identity thing. And yet somehow I was like, I thought if I just worked around Neal more, I'd have that unlock, that the next level and be able to, draw and think like him and be as good as. When I realized that, certainly the best Neal Adams, is going to be Neal Adams. I can only be the best Bill Sienkiewicz. So once I gave up that drive, and when like I said, when I went to continuity, Neal said, look, that continuity is based on my style, don't you? And he pretty much dissuaded me. He said, I don't think you should work here. And I know that Chris and other people at continuity, because our styles were so similar, I think that they saw that the possibility that I could work alongside Neal and double the output in terms of what they could do in terms of advertising. And so I think that, some people around him felt that he was sort of shooting himself in the foot by not hiring me, that he was limiting their income. But what Neal was doing for me was telling me, be your own artist, follow your own path. And if you want to, I think he realized that there were guys who did his style. And then for some reason, yeah. And then I think he felt that I did that, but there was something else there that he didn't want to corrupt or warp or whatever. It was like, I think he felt there was a real artist, not to nail my hand to my forehead, but I think he saw something that was not, as much a part of like the other more rote guys who were influenced by him, So yeah. He pretty much said, do your own thing. And which again was incredibly gracious of him to do so, because I felt like I'd been given, dispensation, and a blessing to kind of go and be my own man, so to speak.
You think Phil Jimenez gets the same criticism regarding being a George Perez influence person?
If he does, then I certainly don't know, he very well, because I don't see it to the extent that maybe some people do. I just see Phil. There are people that I see who do stylistic, leanings toward, either myself or toward other artists, and I can see it. And there are some that it's like, wow, it's like I'm not going to name any names, but I'm like, I've actually gotten bored looking at some artists' work because I feel like it's so much like my work that I did it 5 years ago, and it's like, and I'm bored of it. So I'm almost like I've renewed my boredom of my work through looking at your current work. And it's like, and I feel like there's a part of me going like, just be your own person. It's the same way that I wanted Neal to sort of, and needed Neal to sort of give me, cause to be my own person. I look at some people's work out there and kind of go like, yeah, it's very nice to feel like I've influenced you in the way that Neal influenced me. But, come on, at some point, please.
Yeah, I think everyone starts off as a copy of someone, but then you to
oh yeah,
artists, you got to
Geek and Bernie Fuchs, Mark English, and I'm still, and you look at any artist out there now who, who is viewed as kind of their own person or their own artist. And I can look at their work and see five different influences that are kind of in the stew. I mean, you look at someone like Bernie Wrightson, who's like a genius. And yet you can look and see, okay, he was majorly influenced by Franklin Booth. It's like, that's so obvious, but yet it's like people don't think of him as a Booth clone. They think of him as Bernie Wrightson. He had his own energy and his own, force. So, and his own identity. So I think that people need to kind of, if they're influenced by a certain specific style, they still need to kind of transcend just the surface aspects of it. Otherwise, they're just ending up being, just the worst kind of clone. There's artists out there. There are people who like do Frazetta, and other artists who do, you name it, Mignola, and they're really good in terms of capturing the style that is no longer around. But I mean, Mignola's style is still around, but certain other artists who have passed away. I think I still need to see, something more there. I mean, like, for example, Joe Jusko was very much influenced by Buscema. He'd be the first person to tell you that. And I think that Buscema was Buscema and Joe is Joe. And it's like, you can see some of the lineage, but the things that Joe does are just so distinctly Joe. And it's like, they're influenced by other pulp artists or painters. But, he's not that he's blown Buscema out of the water, but he's blown the influence aspect of it out of the water. I think he's his own person and his own artist. And I think that I'd love to see more of that in general. People move past their own, their own limits.
Their own primary influences. I always found it weird because I think some artists are easier to replicate than others. Like, I feel like Neal is replicable. You've obviously done it. And Jack Kirby, I feel, is like, you could kind of take what Jack Kirby did and kind of get to maybe 90% of it. But then there's like Steve Ditko, who I've never seen anyone copy ever. And I don't know what it is that makes certain artists not to say replicable and irreplicable or better, one is better than the other, but it's just, I don't know what it is.
I think it was a personality, and it was such an idiosyncratic point of view. I mean, you look at so many of the great, guys who like so many of them who are my friends, but again, you mentioned Kirby. Like, Kirby cast a huge shadow. So you see a lot of guys doing sort of like, the huge Kirby distortions.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, some of them kind of like transcend that influence. Other times they kind of get lost in the noise. They sort of become like almost invisible, which is sort of a tragedy to me, that they kind of are so locked in.
I have two last questions. One is, do you have any anecdotes you want to share about Neal?
Let's see, I'm trying to think of some, because it's like I think I've told so many. Yeah, let's see. Well, I mean, like, so many of them relate to like the synapses that have been burned into my brain. Like when I met him, and he had he took my portfolio, and he set it up on one of the flat files in continuity in one of the mid rooms. There was a front room that he had all the other artists at that overlooked the street, and then it was sort of a room with flat files and autograph, and sort of a room with coffee maker and stuff. And then there was like Chris's area, and then there was the area in the back with like other drawing area, drawing tables and whatnot. But Neal sort of brought my portfolio up on top of the flat files, and it was like the king was speaking, and everybody sort of, kind of gravitated toward that. Like the whole room was just sort of packed, and I had no idea what to say or do or whatever. I was just sort of going along for the ride. I just felt like, okay, I'm here with my art hero, and it's like all these people are looking at my work, and Neal is commenting. He's going like, he's leafing through it. He goes, "This is how you do it." He goes, "It's so interesting what passes for a style, because style isn't what we necessarily do correctly. It's what our mistakes are about. Like our styles are really, because if we drew accurately, we wouldn't have a style, because everything would look like what it is, like reality." He said, like, how we interpret it and the things that we do wrong are the things that give us a style. And
It's interesting.
yeah, and I was just like soaking it up. At the same time, I'm like, pinch me, pinch me, pinch me, pinch me. It's like, and then talking to Alan Weiss, who's, going, "Nice tie, dude." I had my Eiffel Tower tie, like, because I was country bumpkin. I was like wearing a polyester,
I can't imagine you in a tie.
there are times I can clean up pretty nice, but certainly at that time, I was this far from a leisure suit, I did have a suit, but it was really, let's put it this way. It's like, I think it was weddings, graduation, and funerals. It was like, okay, I guess if I'm going to go in and try to get into comic books, I probably should put on a suit,
Understood.
but a continuity is dressed not that way.
That's also when you met your the guy who would eventually be your brother from another mother, right? Dennis Cowan.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I met him that day. Actually, that day. That's right. And he was. I still remember him showing me his pencils. What he was, I forget what the story was, but it was so cool to meet people around my own age also that love drawing, and that and and it's funny because I can still vaguely remember Dennis introducing himself and showing me the artwork he was working on. And I remember how much I loved his pencils, even like the very first day. It was like, who knew that we'd like make it like a, one of the collaborations that so many people associate with so many of the comics that they fell in love with. There are times you look at people's work and they show it to you, you kind of have to kind of go like, oh, okay. And it kind of is neither here nor there. And then there are other ones where you kind of, okay, keep going, and then there are ones where you kind of go like, this is totally this person, and it's really cool, and that's one of the things I love about comics also, is that you get so many people whose styles, they might be influenced by a specific artist, but you put that how they interpret that artist style and through their own experiences and their own other influences, and then you put that with an inker who might come from a whole different point of view, and you put them together, and it's peanut butter and chocolate. It's like sometimes it's oil and water. You have to kind of force them together to make it work. Other times it's like it's magic, and that's the great thing about comics, is that some styles just mesh. So yeah, that was interesting. But yeah, so much of it is like burned into my brain, and there are other things that are. My pause there was that I was wondering about whether I should tell this other.
Oh.
Well, I'll say it's like there was. I don't know how to do such without mentioning anything. Well. I was at I'd met with Neal, and I was talking, I was out at the like sort of lobby area talking to Chris, and sort of just hanging out. And I think this is before I was going to walk over to Marvel, and I forget who else was there. They were all being very, very polite, and somebody said something about, I wonder, wait till Mike sees this, Mike Nasser. And I think Mike showed up. And again, I mean, Mike and I, we've known each other over the years since then, but I didn't know him at the time. I know that he was kind of very much influenced by Neal, but I didn't know him. And I think he matched probably me and other people for the kind of level of obsession that he had for Neal's work. And so this is telling tales out of school. This is, again, my experience of it. But I think he was in the back, and I don't think he came out when Neal was showing my work to everybody. And I had my portfolio there, and all the artists sort of were gathered around me, and they said, Mike came out and he pressed the elevator button, and people go like, "You got to look at this guy's stuff, Mike." And he stops and he's like flipping through the pages, and he's just like, it's like everybody's just sort of like elbowing each other, like, like look at what, and Mike is just sort of like flipping through my pages, and it's like, and he's just like slowing down and he's stopping, and it's like, and then the elevator opens up and it had one of those portholes in it, and it's like, and he just gets up, turns, walks into the elevator, turns around, and the door shuts, and I can see his face through the little porthole, and he just looks me right in the eye, and he just stares at me, and then and the elevator starts to go down, and he doesn't break eye contact with me. It's like the whole way down. It was sort of like, what just happened? It was like, I mean, and again, I got to know Mike much later. It's like after that, and it's like we became friends, and I love him to death. But I remember that experience, like I had no frame of reference for that whatsoever. It was just this weird, like, people wanting to goad Mike or like use my work as sort of like some kind of litmus test or some kind of challenge or whatever, if it was certainly, if it wasn't up to Neal's quality, it was certainly enough to try to get somebody's goat, apparently, or act as a taunt. But I still remember that door closing, and just like
Love
it's
it.
like something out of a Marx Brothers or Abbott and Costello movie, with a horror theme. It was just, wow, that's surreal. So,
Mr. Bill Sienkiewicz, you have
right.
You have been influenced by Neal Adams. You've idolized Neal Adams. You've met Neal Adams. You've been mentored by Neal Adams. You've broken away from the influence of Neal Adams. You have inked Neal Adams. You have worked with Neal Adams on a thing for a Roger Waters concert. If you could speak to Neal right now, what would you tell him?
Oh, I'm sure he's giving anatomy lessons to the angels, it's like, or the devils. I mean, he's probably like, he's so inclusive. Like, it's like, the wings don't go like that, I'll show you how wings work, yeah, I can't think of him sort of being gone. It's like he's still here, and that's how I'm choosing to sort of view it. It's like that, we're just, he's really busy on deadlines, and so am I, and we're going to run into each other again, at some show, or he's going to call me, or I'll call him at some point, and we'll just, talk shop again. Yeah, I mean, feeling blessed is just, and is pretty much my default setting for Neal, and for the experience. So and that's the one thing. It's like the world may have lost him, and it's like, and so we may not see anything new from him, but what he gave and what he did sort of, it continues to live on, through myself and other people. It's like, that's the goal I'm established for myself. It's like, I don't want this influence or this kind of influence to kind of go away. And if that means like sort of pushing people or getting people excited, or even sometimes just wanting to just simply be the best I can be. And if that inspires people, you know, then that's something to aim for as well. So he's not gone, you know, he's not gone.
I have a question for you. Who is the Bill Sienkiewicz to your Neal Adams?
I'm not even gonna go there.
Okay, I'll just take that out. Thank you
No,
so much.
I probably could. It's like, and I end up getting like leaving somebody out or infuriating somebody or like maligning somebody or whatever. So I think I'm to you know, I'm gonna thank anybody who sort of feels like they've been influenced enough by me, but are, you know, but the one thing I will say is that so many people who were influenced by Neal and some who were influenced by me, they're in turn influencing me. So it kind of is it's a nice circle.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill
All right,
Sienkiewicz.
man.